There are so many incredibly smart people in this room, so I'm just grateful to be able to talk about some of the research that I did for the Open Lunar Foundation. I was a fellow this year. My previous experience is at SpaceX as a launch engineer / build reliability engineer, and so a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is related to the risk of lunar landings as well as the reason why they're necessary. To start, the moon has been a symbol of humanity for probably the longest out of any other symbol on this planet. Maybe the sun. Maybe the sun can have symbolism too. But the moon is a big symbol. For Egyptians, we had the god of the moon, who was Khonsu. In Chinese philosophy, we had the moon and sun, yin and yang. And then the Iroquois Confederacy, it was a timekeeping guide, protector. The moon has signified so many things for us over the course of human history. And on July 20th, 1969, it also signaled innovation. It became a major symbol of what is possible for us, where else we could go. And so as we begin developing towards a cislunar economy, we want to protect the people who are going to be there. We want to protect the funds that are going towards this. And so that brings up the concept of how do you ensure that people are landing safely? How do you ensure that this symbol doesn't become something that is risky to people too? I mean, there's inherent risk with spaceflight, but we have these missions who have unfortunately not been so successful, and this represents millions and millions and millions of dollars that are jeopardized, and also jeopardizes some of the public trust when it comes to lunar landings. So why does this happen? Well, we don't have a lunar landing pad, right? And so there are lunar surface hazards. There's landing site durability. So the surface of the moon is quite jagged. It's been formed after many millennia of meteoroid impacts, and there's shards of rock everywhere. And resource scarcity, meaning that once you land on the moon, you don't really have any resources. We have so many resources on Earth, but not so many on the moon. How do you mitigate that? Construction and blast shields create the pad itself, create some blast shields around it. Based on some of the work by Jeffrey Montez and Philip Metzger, we understand that the ejecta coming from regolith when you land on the moon could pose a serious hazard to the infrastructure around it. Communications and geometric / volumetric inspection. As you continue to land on the moon, making sure that you are communicating with the launch vehicle that is coming down on that surface, so ideally, you don't have any accidents. I think that that's one of the main root causes of landing failures, is that it's really those last final feet that are quite difficult to estimate. From what I understand, on Apollo 11, when landing the lunar lander, there was a lot of manual sort of steering of the spacecraft, because it's those final feet that you don't necessarily have the most detailed understanding of. If you can have more detailed communications, if you can really estimate how close you are to that landing site, that's ideal. And then resource scarcity. So over time, as we continue to launch more payloads onto the moon, managing the propellant as well as generating power, making sure that we can power all of these communications, that we can power the inspection mechanisms, and even repairing the surface, et cetera. But there are risks with these too. Not all risk is lost. As a build reliability engineer, I understand that there is that risk of infrastructure damage, energy reliability, and communications failure / resource depletion. And so I can't say that just the concept of building a lunar landing pad is going to necessarily solve all the risks, but at least it buys down on some of the major ones. So understanding those risks, we have quite a few missions coming up over the next decade, and this is only a small portion of them. As we improve on our launch capabilities, as we buy down on how much it even costs to transport to the moon, I expect that that cadence is going to go up. And so as part of my research for the Open Lunar Foundation, I was studying the ROI on a lunar launch pad. Part of my assumptions with this, first, there are a lot of assumptions with the moon. I found, I don't know if you guys agree. For this, I was so surprised that like I didn't get pushback on it, and I encourage you to give pushback because I was just like, I was honestly taking as much as I could get from like the studies that have been performed, but for the most part, like I'm really just estimating on an ROI for the lunar launch pad. So for this, I'm assuming that it's around like $11 million per launch that you like pay to use this launch pad. The initial investment, I pulled this from Philip Metzger's paper revolving the costs involved in building the launch site, and then there are the annual operating costs as well as inflation, assuming that operating costs are going to continue to increase. For this study, I assume that there would be 10 launches per year. Ideally, there would be more over time, but that's just, we're just gonna start there. We're just gonna start there. We're estimating a lot today. And so when I did this analysis, what I found was that after 23 launches, you start to see that your revenue equates to the operating costs that have gone into this launch pad, or this landing pad. Launch pad is another thing that I did not get the chance to research, but it could be its own entire paper, honestly. But over time, as you continue to launch, you start to see a major return on investment. Maybe you could invest that into building more launch pads or landing pads. You can invest that into having parallel landing pads and being able to park multiple at one site. That would be the hope. Hopefully we get to that point. So when it comes to building a landing pad cooperatively, I like to draw a simile to, or an analogy to the recent laws. Oh, okay. Google, right? Google pretty much built the entire, like, the highway of the internet. And all of the different websites that you navigate to on Google, they are like exits on that highway. Recently, Google released an AI feature that allows you to not have to go to those websites so that you can just stay on like the front page and Google gets all that ad revenue. Therefore, sort of like monopolizing the internet, cutting back on the revenues that those websites get to see. And it's almost like they get to close the exits over time, right? But those companies, they built Google. They built that billion-dollar company, trillion-dollar company. And so when it comes to the moon, who is going to be the highway provider? Who gets to say who has access to all those exits? Humanity has looked at the moon as a symbol for the entirety that has ever existed. And should one company get to decide who has access to that moon, how much they pay? I don't think so. I don't think so. And so I've got this vision for a cooperative landing pad where it is where we build a dedicated lunar landing mission. It's a public-private partnership of lunar landing component providers, so communications, energy, propellant management, the bricks. Let's get all of them together, let's build something cooperatively, and let's fund it using intergovernmental development, meaning that it's not just the USA that funds this and has control over it, but it really should be more democratic access to who sort of can claim ownership over this lunar landing pad and who can govern it. And then let's ensure that there's representation for all extraterrestrial development. This is the first step towards getting to Mars. This is the first step towards interplanetary development or exploration, human society around the solar system that isn't just Earth. I really want to make sure that we have representation for everyone there. And so if you're interested, I am starting a lunar landing pad working group. I want to think about what the business case is for this. How do we get a mission? I really don't know what's possible, but I think all of us here are very optimistic. And so if you're interested, please sign up. I will send it to the WhatsApp group. So if you're interested in learning more, I've got a full white paper that I just published on it with the Open Lunar Foundation. Thank you for your time. I will now take questions.
And sorry, we're also at 10 minutes.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
I'll get your question after. Okay, sweet.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.